The shutdown is over. It happened late last night. President Trump from the Oval Office signed it, said it was time for this to all be over. There was applause. There was a lot, of course, conversation that led into it, saying none of this really had to happen. But, of course, here we are. It is over. I think this is a good day for America in that sense. However, it's not a good day, it feels like, for the Democrats, as the far left groups, the AOCs, the squads, are saying, we cannot believe this shutdown is over. You know, they called for the shutdown to end, and then when the shutdown got too close to ending, they go, how dare you? So much so that they are calling to primary their own party members who decided to very lightly cave, if you will.
I think what is so important for folks to understand is that this problem is bigger than one person, and it actually is bigger than the minority leader in the Senate. A leader is a reflection of the party, and Senate Democrats have selected their leadership to represent them. And so the question needs to be bigger than just one person. We have several Senate primaries this cycle. I know I'm being asked about New York. That is years from now. I have to remind my own constituents because they think that this election is this year. We actually do have Senate elections this year. And my hope is that people across this country actually participate in their primary elections in selecting their leadership. Thank you.
You didn't really answer the question.
What I'd say to this is, it's wonderful. Because in midterm elections, when you have the White House, the House, and the Senate, traditionally that midterm, you lose one of those. Not necessarily both, but one. And it's been mostly focused on the House. The Senate's looking pretty good for Republicans. So maybe that's why AOC says this is the time to take the risk. But if you can create inter-Democrat fighting at the statewide level, that filters down to those House races in the key states that they're trying to win to flip. Because then you've got half that candidate's supporters saying, I'm against the current senator. I want the radical. And then the other, so what is that local, the one running for House of Representatives, do they have to figure out if they're going to endorse the challenger to an incumbent senator? It could be a mess for Democrats, but I think what AOC is, she's making the long-term play to take the party the way of her and Mamdani.
The idea of unseating someone who has been there for a while, it is always a gigantic uphill battle.
It is, unless, and it's still an uphill battle, but you've got this whole new movement. I mean, the fact that a 34, I think, turning 35, Mamdani in New York took out Cuomo, who was very close early on. He was leading way ahead, had lots of money, and kind of Republicans and Democrats were okay with him if you live in New York City. And then he just does this blowout win. So she's saying, well, hey, if you can do that, if you can take on dynasties in states like New York, we can take on, some senators who have made it, who were...
Yeah, they can do the reverse of MAGA in their own party.
Will has the names, too, of the ones that actually voted to reopen who are up for re-election.
It's interesting because you know what they did here very specifically. Dick Durbin and Jeanne Shaheen are the only two that voted for it to reopen in the Senate. They're both retiring. So that's going to be a primary to see who will be that incumbent replacement. They were very strategic with that, knowing they would get the ire from the AOCs. But there's 13 Democrats up for re-election. I think what she's banking on is that if you can not flip the seat, but instead flip who the incumbent will be, then you can take out the leadership because the progressives of the party are not happy.
I think there were some adults in the room, so to speak, in D.C. who said, this has gone on long enough. There's starting to be real pain with the SNAP program. There's starting to be real pain at the airports. The federal workers aren't being employed are paid, I should say. So, they're going to see how this plays out long term. I think Chuck Schumer knew that there were members of his caucus that wanted to negotiate a deal to end this. You had people like Tim Kaine, who has a high percentage of federal workers in Virginia. And you have people like Mark Warner, who voted against the deal. But I think he was probably in the kind of hope yes, vote no category. Mark Warner's on the ballot in 2026, and he didn't want to draw a primary opponent. And that's a real risk right now when you have people like AOC and Bernie Sanders out there saying they're going to recruit Mamdani-like candidates to run against them.
I think we should play this from Senator John Fetterman, who had been consistently for reopening the government. He said something to the effect of, it used to be a part of our party platform that we have to keep the government open. But he is also criticizing the party, but for a different reason than AOC. Let's go ahead and roll bite one from Senator John Fetterman on CBS.
I vote a 91% Democratic line. And if Democrats have a problem with somebody that votes 91% of the same times as you are, more than 9 out of 10 times, then maybe our party has a bigger problem, and maybe it's not the big tent party that people need and we want to have to win that moving forward for that.
What you start to see here, Jordan, is cracks in their base.
91% is not good enough for this.
Right, that's a moderate now. I mean, if you're 91% of the time in line with your party.
Conservatives, you want your people elected to vote 100%, but strategically, you look in states that are tougher to win.
It's not realistic.
Susan Collins, people like that. Better to have them than somebody who's on the left, who's not going to vote with you 90% of the time, but is going to vote against you 95 or 98% of the time. But the fact is, I don't think 91% is good enough for the left anymore.
Well, and if you probably look at those votes, if it's 91% of the time, it's probably Israel and the government shutdown are the two things he voted against his party on.
Yeah.
I mean, in reality, the 91% figure is all of the Democrat ideology and policy.
I think this is proof positive that the media are not helping the Democrats because they think that they should just keep this fight quiet. But the reality is what AOC just said should be on the front page paper of every single newspaper in America and on broadcast TV, because she is laying down the gauntlet that the Democrats lost because they're not progressive, socialist, communist enough. And that should be a debate that we want to have in the Republican Party. Let's have that debate. Let's talk about Mamdani in Middle America. Let's talk about the Mamdani people who are going to rise up and try to take hold of leadership in our cities. That is a disaster for America. The media are ignoring that because they're tacitly supportive of this radical takeover. But they are going to continue losing. Normal Americans are going to be outraged and going to reject them. Maybe we should just keep it quiet so that they keep losing.
When you have AOC saying, let's go after all the incumbents, I mean, it causes a mess for Senate races because Senate races are statewide. And then the House races where you may be a better chance at taking back the House than the Senate if you're a Democrat. What does that candidate have to do? Do they have to pick between the AOC candidate now? Does that start messing up there? She's actually could cause a lot of trouble in the upcoming election cycle, so I don't want to, I kind of like, if she wants to do this, Rick, like what you said, please do it.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm going with this. It's outrageous, but at the same time, from a purely political standpoint of winning and losing, and I'm a very competitive person, let's let them continue to take over the Democratic Party. I think that the people who really care about America, the middle class voters, the people who kind of swing either voting for Democrat or Republican, depending on who the person is, I think that they are showing that they're rejecting socialism, communism, these types of people. Yes, the big cities like New York City are always going to flirt with that idea and that ideology. But make no mistake, first and second generation Americans are conservative. They love America. They recognize why they left other countries. It's the third, fourth, fifth, sixth generation white liberals who are electing people like Mamdani.